got another video by Mentis. I like Mentis's videos. This is the complete guide to detecting midwits. Oh boy, I get called that all the time. I get called a midwit. Would one accept someone's observational report that he had seen a bird that was red and a non-red all over at the same time as a refutation of the law of contradiction rather than the pronouncement of an idiot?
Hey internets, I've explained what a midwit is before, but the TLDR of it is that a midwit is a pseudo-intellectual. They are a person with average to above average intellect who is pretending to be a genius, and in some cases they've even convinced themselves. This is what distinguishes a midwit from the average Joe. There's nothing wrong with having—
I'm actually the dumbest person in my friend group. Like, my friends are like all smarter than me.
Average intellect. It's just one aspect of who you are. And so what makes a midwit is the aspect of pretension.
Except when it comes to design, then I'm better. But like other than that, like I'm like dumber at everything else basically.
Conscientiousness. Or another way to put it is that there's someone who's trying to be an intellectual.
If it comes to if it comes to like creativity and like DMing, I'm the best. But if it comes to like other stuff like math, it's just so boring to me. I just like I can't like I'm just not interested in it. It's just so hard for me because it's like I'm so disinterested in it that like it takes me forever to do anything.
And yet they are, in terms of IQ, capped at +1 standard.
Anyone calling you a midwit is probably projecting. Midwits do not actually think about things the way that you do. It's like 90% emotions. It's kind of weird. Like I feel like half the time is like it's either like one or the other. It's like either I'm absolutely retarded and like I just don't understand like everybody, because I always have this problem where like I'm dealing with people and like I just don't understand, like I don't understand like their line of like reasoning at all. Like it doesn't make any sense to me. But then like other people, so it's kind of like this. I don't understand people's lines of reasoning, but then they understand each other's lines of reasoning. So I'm like, I feel like I'm the retarded one. You know what I mean? Like I feel like, wait, am I the one that's retarded? Because it's like I'll have a line of reasoning and nobody else understands it, but then they understand each other's lines of reasoning. It's like, it must be my fault then, right? That's what I feel all the time.
While they may be smarter than the average bear, they're not necessarily exceptional. And this of course leads to kind of a silly problem that has always existed throughout human civilization, which is the phenomenon of people who think they know what they're talking about, and in some cases are very rhetorically skilled at convincing others that they know what they're talking about, but of course unfortunately they don't.
Thank you, Joel.
Which in some ways actually makes midwittery more dangerous than dimwittery, as midwits often serve as unwitting foot soldiers towards the goal of giving a fake intellectual legitimacy that is then used to justify maintaining a corrupt status quo.
Dude, like,
but the good news is there's actually a lot of simple ways.
Dude, it like feels that way so much when I'm like online now. Dude, I don't know. It's like dude, how do I explain it? It's like as I've gotten older, I've felt like the world was more empty. I don't know how else to explain it other than that. That sounds really bad. That sounds like really fucking what's the word? Not really empty, like lonely. Does that make sense? Like the world feels more lonely. Anyone who calls you a midwit seems like I don't know. Again, I don't know. I actually don't know the answer to that, to be honest. Thank you for the bits again. I don't know the answer. It's just like it feels like I don't relate to anybody. It's like I feel like an alien. Like where I feel like I'm not perceiving the same reality. You know, like I see reality, but it's like, am I looking at like a different dimension than like other people? That's what it feels like. And I'm like, how could you possibly come to like this conclusion? And like, I just don't get it. I don't get how it's even possible, you know? And then it makes me feel like an alien or something. And then I feel like a little, it's not really like depressed, but like it's like lonely. That's the best way to explain it, is like lonely.
Ways that even an average Joe can use to kind of sniff out these pseudo-intellectuals. And that's what this video is going to be about. I'm going to be sharing some simple-to-spot patterns of midwit behavior that kind of quickly let you know that you're dealing with a pseudo, as there are certain traits that midwits possess that people who actually are above +2 standard deviation generally don't suffer from. But first, this video doesn't have a sponsor, but I have created a new Gamer Rant mousepad on my merch store. It's actually pretty nice. And just FYI, obviously,
that's like, dude, that's like the classic, like, old fucking Atari controller. Have any of you ever played with one of those? I had one of those. My dad had one. He had like the one that had like the little like knob at the top and the buttons on the side too.
And Lenovo laptop not included. I just took this to give you a better idea of how much space it takes up. So yeah, if you want to support me or if you just want some cool stuff, you
Sick
can check the
Fumos,
merch store
bro.
out. A link will be in the cards and the description below. So anyways, the first of these is that Midwits try too hard to adapt the intellectual aesthetic. One of the most absolutely hilarious Midwit memes out there is actually this one, where both the pleb and the genius just kind of dress in whatever they find comfortable, while the Midwit tries really hard to kind of adapt the stereotypical nerd geek aesthetic. So in other words, they're just kind of putting on a show, really. And this is because Midwits, in an attempt to be an intellectual, they always adopt the optics of the intellectual. They try to fit the stereotypical mold of what society tends to assume an intellectual looks like. And this goes far beyond just how they dress. You'll notice this pattern in just about everything. For example, one of the quickest ways to see that you're probably dealing with a Midwit, not all the time, but a really good indicator, if you're, say, watching a streamer or debate bro, and their background is a shelf of books. Because again, they're trying to adopt the aesthetic. They want to show others, oh, look at these books I read. So within the mindset of the
That's a lot of people, actually.
Midwit is actually kind of an element of narcissism, and so they have this desperate need to adopt.
I don't even have a bookshelf in my room. I don't. My bookshelf is in my mom's room, actually. So my mom has a bookshelf. I just take over her bookshelf, and I filled her bookshelf with Ishizoku reviewers, novels, and manga. So my mom has that in her room. So like, if you like go into my mom's like room, there's a bookshelf and you just see like Ishizoku reviewers like on the fucking shelf. Yeah. And also like various Alice Soft art books. I got Cross Channel on there. I've got Underwater Railroad Mono. I got some Umineko ones, Pretty Cure ones. It's just like a lot of art books, basically.
The stereotypical intellectual image, when in reality those of us who actually are above +2 standard deviations generally don't care about this at all. Like for example, Aaron Clary here, who has a test—
How much Yahweh? 0. I have 0. 0 Yahweh. Literally 0. Not even a single one. There used to be some werewolf Yahweh on my bookshelf, but it wasn't mine. It was my brother's, actually. So like it was my brother's. So now that my brother doesn't live with me, it's not there anymore. So I have 0. So yeah. Actually, hold on, wait. I do have one. I have Ancient Magus's Bride. I have like Ancient Magus's Bride 1 and like the side story. I have like both of those, like the book for that. Yeah. I mean, Ancient Magus's Bride is like kind of like Twilight, to be fair. Like I'm just being real. It's like kind of like Twilight.
IQ somewhere around +3 standard deviations. I forget the exact number. It doesn't really matter. The point is, you can see that he doesn't care. He's got freaking Snoopy and Cowboy Bebop in the background. He doesn't need to show some kind of useless sociology degree or whatever behind it, or some massive stack of books that are just, you know, inconspicuously
I don't have a degree. I didn't finish college. I got fucking bored and I quit. I rage quit I rage quit college to play Ragnarok online. That's the truth. I thought it was a waste of time. I just played Ragnarok. I was just like, I was MVPing Egga for like the hat because I wanted like the little pause for the hat because the hat was like cute as fuck. And I was like, I could go to class, I could go to college, like I could go to my like university class, like, or I could camp this fucking boss and then get like a bunch of hats and then like then I would like look really cute with the hat and then the little like leaf in my mouth. So yeah, that's what I did.
So that the camera picks them all up.
I'm like the only one in my family that like didn't like of my generation. I'm the only one that didn't go to college.
And this isn't always the case. I occasionally see actual intelligent people do this, but it's mostly the Midwits who do this because it doesn't really.
Which is like kind of funny because like everybody else like in my generation is like pretty fucking left. I'm like the only one that isn't. So it's like I'm kind of like right? Like it's kind of interesting.
Matter. The people who do that are just adopting an aesthetic. So whenever you come across someone where it seems like they're just almost trying too hard to convince you that they're smart, well, the reality is they're probably not. Which brings me to the next Midwit behavioral pattern, which is somewhat related to this, which is that Midwits tend to fall for the framing effect a lot. Almost as if they spend a longer time thinking about their rhetoric than about whether or not what they say and what they believe is actually true. And this flawed way of thinking about the world often leads the Midwit to make some pretty seriously silly arguments every now and then, which is where they will pretend pretentiously claim or act as if they're an above an argument based on superficial features of that argument, and then act like that's the same as refuting it. So for example, one kind of silly attempted refutation that I get of some of my own videos from Reddit Midwits is the whole "he uses memes" argument, where one of my videos will get posted by someone else and someone will say, "Oh, it just has too many memes, so this is just so unprofessional."
Like it's like the argument is bad because it's a joke. Or something like that. Yeah.
I'm not even going to consider it. When in reality, that doesn't matter. Whether there's memes or not in the video, or how the video is presented, aka how it is framed. The only thing that matters is whether or not the arguments are true and whether or not they're logically coherent. If you say 1 + 1 = 2, or you say...
What they say, that memes are the what to the soul or something? That guy from Metal Gear?
1 + 1 = 2, and then you post a soy jack next to that. That doesn't matter at all. It doesn't actually change anything about the factual mathematical statement. But midwits will often act as if it does. They get
the window, the DNA of the soul,
or exhibiting whatever they consider to be proper behavior, more so than whether or not something is true, which is generally not how people who are legitimately above +2 standard deviations think. Which kind of brings me to the next midwit behavior point. Midwits tend to be pedantic. I did a kind of quick rant about this a while ago, but the basic thing is that the nitpick is the soul of the midwit. Midwits think that if they can deconstruct an irrelevant thing about a subject, then that somehow magically makes their take correct. And so midwits will often try to refute things by pointing out things that don't actually refute it. And the whole, "oh, this person is in the wrong because they're not acting professional enough for my tastes, because he posted his argument next to a meme instead of a picture."
Well, one thing that they do a lot is they'll be like, "oh, this person this person follows this person on X, so therefore their point is therefore their point is wrong." I see a lot of that. Like, "oh, well, yeah, that person's like you have like a whole argument, and be like, "yeah, I'm not even listening to you because
of himself next to his
she's anime, so who cares?" Yeah,
that means he must be wrong. That's just kind of your basic go-to example of midwit think. Another interesting pattern is that midwits tend to use non-colloquial language in a manner that is completely superfluous. This is something that midwits in college and academia do all the time. They try to cover up their lack of understanding and cover up the fact...
one thing though? One thing with me though is I don't like big words. To be honest, like I don't like them. Even in my writing, I try to avoid using big words specifically. I think like for me, like communication is more important than like a word sounding cool. So that's like one thing. Like I write very simply.
That all they're really doing is just regurgitating what their professor told them by swapping their arguments in a kind of word soup. And the way that you spot this is you ask yourself whether or not the level of vocabulary that they're using is necessary to convey the point that they're trying to make. Because language at the end of the day is just a social construct. Its entire purpose is just to relay information from one to another. And the point of non-colloquial language, the point of less common vocabulary, is more or less just to reduce ambiguity, which is sometimes necessary, but sometimes it's not. But midwits will do it regardless of the context, because they're trying to compensate by showing off. And so midwits will use that type of language, even in contexts where it increases the ambiguity, is simply because they're just trying to show off how many non-colloquial words they know.
What he says, like basically how I feel is like the point of language is to communicate. So if you use big words for the sake of using big words, it just makes it less. It makes it harder to communicate. It makes it like more difficult to communicate, right? Yeah. So I don't.
So yeah, if you couldn't tell, a lot of these are just that midwits like to adopt the optics of intellect. If you understand that, you'll spot about roughly 70% of midwit behavior. It's all, "ooh,
thank you for the follow,
look at me. I'm using the same linguistic style as academic papers, ooh." But yet they do it in situations where it's completely unnecessary, which is actually completely stupid, because then it makes a very simple concept, which a lot of the concepts that midwits talk about are really simple concepts. A midwit will actually take a simple concept and somehow make it harder to understand for the average person, because they're so obsessed with adopting the image of intelligentsia for themselves that they feel the need to adopt said linguistic style even when it's completely unnecessary. Which brings me to the next point, which is that midwits tend to adopt a philosophy or ideology that is trendy amongst the intellectual elites. This is why you see so many journalists and academics who've adopted the ideology of postmodernist wokeism and are kind of constantly virtue signaling this neo-Marxist social justice ideology. They of course don't actually understand the ideology, because if they did, they would realize that it's very stupid, but but they convince themselves that it's true anyways, because it's the current accepted ideology of the elite class. And you can actually see similar things happening in human history. For example, in many medieval civilizations, everyone of the elite class was a certain religion, and so naturally everybody who wanted to make themselves of the intellectual elite had to also profess those same beliefs. And this is in stark contrast to people who actually are gifted. People who actually are gifted, who actually are unusually intelligent, generally only care if something is true or not. They don't really care what the elites say. Sometimes the intellectual elites are right, and on some things they're wrong. And currently we're kind of in a sticky situation where the dominant ideology is one that's very stupid, which is sad and causes a lot of problems for the world, but on the flip side, it also gives a really easy way to detect midwits. Because if you see someone who is a so-called intellectual professing woke ideology, then you kind of immediately know that they're not actually as bright as they want people to believe. I've actually kind of done an entire series of debunking woke ideology. I have an entire playlist for it. A lot of the postmodernist ideology within wokeism is based on things that are just demonstrably wrong, just using basic reason. The only times you'll actually—
I gotta watch like that libertarian video that Mentis made. Everyone told me to watch it. I just haven't seen it yet.
See a genuinely gifted person professing woke beliefs is when they're a grifter. It's when they're just pretending to believe it in order to get along with the rest of intelligentsia, but they don't actually believe it. And on this note, something that's kind of related to wokeism but doesn't necessarily need to be, is that midwits will often try to debunk IQ tests. It seems that at least once a week or so, somewhere on the interwebs, there's a—
Oh, I always hear this. I hear that. I hear this. People go like, yeah, but do they have social IQ? I always hear that. You guys hear that shit? Yeah, you might have IQ, but do you have social IQ? They always fucking say that shit all the time. Emotional IQ, that's the one. Emotional IQ, yeah.
Midwit out there who thinks he's an absolute genius for making the correlation doesn't imply causation argument against the legitimacy of IQ as a measure of cognitive ability. And these can range from either really stupid arguments against IQ—
all IQ tests are is it's just like they're like basically puzzles where there's like they just have like a logic puzzle where it's like a sequence, and then you have to like discover the pattern in the sequence and then like answer the pattern. That's basically all they are. Like your capability of like reasoning, basically, of making a decision based on like I don't know, just observing the differences in like a thing, and then using that to be like, okay, well, this is probably like what the pattern is, the relation between like these three things. What's the relationship between those three things? And then you take that and then you try to apply that to the answers, basically. Yeah, it's all it is, basically.
Or arguments that appear more sophisticated at first, but when examined reveal themselves to be complete BS. The harsh reality is that the evidence and reasoning behind it is very overwhelmingly in favor of the fact that IQ is a fairly powerful predictor of a person's ability to complete cognitive tasks, regardless of other factors you control for. Which makes sense, really, because IQ tests are really just basic reasoning questions. They're designed—
Yeah, like this. They're basically like this, where like it'll just be like this, and then like what's here, basically, and then you have to like figure it out.
To test problem-solving skills more so than knowledge, which makes it a relatively good predictor in how fast someone will learn or pick up on things. And yet midwits are—
You want to know like one problem I have with those tests is I tend to do pretty good on them, but sometimes I don't know why. Like sometimes like I can intuit the answer, but then I don't know why that's the answer. Like it's harder for me to reach the why than it is to like intuit like which one it is. It's like I can see like the pattern, but then like understanding it takes me longer.
Constantly trying to refute it, trying so hard that they even often resort to using fraudulent data. And there's kind of two reasons behind why this happens. One of them, in my opinion, is probably just pure midwit cope. They took one of these tests, didn't score as high as they thought they should.
I got like
and so,
140.
Of course, one of the go-to
when I took it.
hamsterizations of that is that IQ must be
I
booked.
think it was like 138 actually. It might have been
and
130. I think my friend got 140 something. I like 138 or something.
One that kind of ties into my previous point that midwits tend to adopt neo-Marxist woke ideology and postmodernist ideology.
But like, I actually don't think I'm that smart, to be honest. I don't like. It's like I said. Like I intuit a lot of it, and I don't know why. Like I can't like tell you like how I got to that. It's basically like I will see it, and I'll be like, it's this one, and like I don't know why it's that one, but like I just do, right?
ideology. It's kind of summarized by this silly X post I saw right
Especially
here
when
recently,
it gets like
which
harder
was in
stuff.
response to a bogus attempt to debunk IQ. IQ denial is one of the few areas where you can have if evolution real, why they still monkeys do to your beliefs without getting marked as a dummy, because IQ denial is socially desirable in left-wing social circles.
No, it's probably like a skill that's like related to like game development. Because so like a lot of my skill set is like understanding like why something is bad. Like in game when it comes to like game development, especially like when it comes to like balance, there's usually like other factors that exist. How do I explain it? So for instance, this happens a lot in like game development where like something will be like broken, but then it's not specifically that thing that's broken. It's like a different system that might seem unrelated, but the other system causes that system to be broken. So like what happens a lot in game balance, and you guys probably will understand as gamers, you'll probably know what I'm talking about here. A lot of the times the dev will see a problem and then they'll nerf something. They'll be like, oh yeah, that's OP. Like, well, let's nerf it. They nerf it, but it doesn't actually fix it. Right. And then they have to like nerf it over and over and over again until it sucks. And it's like, it's completely like just in the dirt and it's garbage. But they never actually fix the underlying issue. Right. Yeah, Helldivers is a good example. Yeah. Like the old I don't know how like balanced Helldivers is now because like I don't really play it like all the time now. But like before when I was following like the balance patches, yeah, it was like sort of similar to that, where a lot of the weapons, the underlying issue was that the weapons had no purpose. Right. So it doesn't matter like how much you buff it or how much you nerf it if they have no purpose, because it's always going to be if there's no specific like niche purpose for like each weapon, then at some point then no matter what, it becomes a number issue where either one is just more OP than the other one, right? So when you're balancing something like Helldivers, for instance, like you have to make like everything purpose built, like where it has a niche that it fulfills, and then it becomes good. It becomes good in like that specific case, and so in that specific case, you'd want to take it, because if you make two guns that are like exactly the same, they fulfill the exact same purpose, then it's just gonna matter on like which one has more damage, basically, right? Which one has more output? That's like the important thing. I mean, there's some other stuff too. Like you can do like playstyle differences where like one is better for some playstyles, and the other one's better for other playstyles, right? Like for instance, like guns that like are easier to aim, being better for people that can't aim. So like for them, it's stronger, right? There's a bunch of stuff involved in it, but yeah, because like that's like basically like that's like my job, right? It's like. So because of that, like I can see a problem, and then I could be like, okay, what are the other systems involved? And like I just kind of, I don't know how to explain it. It's like it's kind of like I go through like everything and I try to find like the root, right? Like with the pattern, like the issue that is like at the very bottom of the thing. Like a good example is so I was working on this game. I was working on League of Legends, and there was a patch where like healing was really fucking OP, and everyone was like, oh, like healing's like the fucking worst. And the problem wasn't necessarily the healing in of itself. Healing was not the problem. The problem was the sustainment of the healing. So if you nerf healing, it doesn't actually fix it. Does that make sense? It doesn't actually fix the sustain part. All it does is make healing feel bad. Right? So it's like you have to find out what the solution to that problem is. So if you fix something that is not the core of the issue, you end up basically putting band-aids on the game constantly. So you're just fixing the symptom, but you're never curing the actual problem. Does that make sense? Sorry, I'm not really good at explaining myself. Yeah, you're kicking it down the line, exactly. So when you just be like, oh, like, you know, that's too strong. But if you're like, oh, this thing is too strong, but you don't understand why it's too strong, you don't understand where that fits in the tree, right? So like a game has like a foundation, right? Like it's not, a game is multiple systems. It's not like one system, right? So like a video game is like multiple things happening at the same time. You have like this, you know, how does damage interact, crit, and then now you have debuffs, and then you have party composition, and then you have like the map, like everything basically is like interconnected. It's like this web of like interconnected mechanics, right? And if you are unable to locate the thread that connects to the thing that breaks everything, then you'll never fix it. Basically, all you're doing is just like putting a temporary solution, and then it's gonna rear its head like eventually. And by just breaking things that aren't by like nerfing or buffing things without understanding the issue, all you do is make it feel bad. You're passing along the feeling bad to somebody else, right? So a good way to explain this is, again, with healing, is like if you just nerf healing without understanding like the issue of it, you don't solve the issue, but you make healers feel bad at the expense. I mean, you make them feel bad at their expense to make other people feel better. And I don't like that. Does that, I'm not a fan of that kind of thing.
As the entire ideological framework is reliant on blank slatism. Yeah, that's pretty much it. One of the basic concepts of wokeism is it's not just...
I'm telling you guys, like, this is like a fucking crazy... It is really, like... It is not common for a person to be able to not do that. It's like one of the biggest issues in game development, I think, especially for like live game development, is I think like it's a particular set of skills. I think you need like just the right level of like the person. You need the person that is like both able to play the game. So like one, they actually play the game and they play the game a lot. You need that. You also need them to be like slightly crazy so that they're the kind of person that can see like the fucking web that I was talking about, and they have to be creative enough to solve it. So it's like this fucked up like that. And I'm not saying that like that makes a person better than other people. It's just, you know how there's like different types of people? You need like a bunch of rare traits in one single person. That's like the problem, right? And it's like all of those traits individually, you can find those amongst people, right? But then like having all of those traits in a single person is difficult, I think. It's like rare. And I think that's the issue.
Simply collectivism. That's why the woke right isn't really a thing. Rather, wokeism tries to elevate or belittle people based on their collective group's status as being a victim or oppressor. And the only way to really do that is to...
You have to be like just degenerate enough to play too much. Degenerate enough to play too much, creative enough to find the solution, and then I don't know what the other one is. It's like you have to be creative enough to find the solution, degenerate enough to see it, and then you have to, I guess, have like a maybe like you have to have like sort of, you have to have the empathy to like understand how everyone feels in the situation. So it's like really, really weird.
Constantly commit the equity fallacy. It's assuming that any unequal outcome must be the result of some kind of oppression, which is a component of the ideology that is just completely destroyed when you're forced to face the reality and face the facts that people are not. I haven't played it recently,
but like Yu-Gi-Oh was like one of the worst like tabletop. Yu-Gi-Oh was like the worst card game I've played. It's like maybe only like Pokemon is like right next to it. Like it's fucking awful. Like I remember playing Yu-Gi-Oh and like everyone was playing it and it was just so fucking bad. But like I played like Magic the Gathering, so it was like
same. That whole house of cards that wokeism rests on just kind of collapses pretty fast there. And so that's
I just remember it being like, change your heart, you're dead. That's like the game. Change your heart, you're dead.
It's often try to attack the legitimacy of IQ. On one hand, it's just kind of cope, but on the other hand, it's just another way for them to virtue signal. It's just another way for them to bend the knee and show their allegiance to the church of correct opinions. Which brings me to my next point, which is that midwits are slightly more likely to fall for the moralistic fallacy. In their attempts to put on a show of intelligence by showing their allegiance to the correct think of intelligentsia, they will often forget that what is moral isn't necessarily what is true. For example, going back to wokeism, they'll often make the claim that equality makes me feel good, therefore equality is real. And that's not actually true. Just because you have a moral epistemology that requires you to worship equality, even if that system of ethics was the best system of ethics, which it's not, but let's just pretend that it is, it wouldn't matter. That doesn't make equality a real thing. And in some cases, midwits will also make this same mistake, but in reverse, thinking that because something is true, then it must also be moral.
I was a filthy blue mill deck player.
I think the most recent example of this type of midwittery, specifically in politics, has to do with kind of this meme. If Doge has found billions in fraud and abuse...
I only played Mill and Ping. Yeah, like literally the two most annoying kinds of decks. I don't know how it is like now, but like back in the day, like Ping and Mill were the most annoying. Do people still play Ping decks? Is that still a thing? Does anyone play it? Like, do they call it Ping decks? I don't know what they're called anymore. They were called Ping decks. It was like Prodigal Sorcerer. You just got a bunch of those like fucking 1/1 creatures that like you tap them, deal 1 direct damage to anything. And all you do is just fucking tap them every turn for like 1 damage. It's like so fucking annoying.
Why haven't there been any arrests? Now, this meme is making fun of this particular subject, but there are people who unironically believe it. They think that because the government created bureaucratic...
Actually, one that I did was fucking Silo Lava Burst.
News by which their fraud could be considered legal, then in their mind that means Doge hasn't uncovered any wrongdoing.
Like, you just lava burst them for like fucking
ridiculous. Just because 20. The ruler makes a rule that gives him an exception to be bad doesn't mean what he's doing.
Like wall them
bad.
out until your silo has 20 and then you lava burst.
With moralistic reasoning, but midwits tend to be stuck at conventional morality. They never really develop consistent moral principles, and so they tend to frequently confuse morality with legality and majority opinion. So while it may be true that a lot of government waste did in fact follow the proper bureaucratic procedure in order to properly cross the T's and dot the I's so that the spending was legitimized, that obviously doesn't mean that the spending was good. It just means that the bureaucrats created loopholes so that they can break their own rules. And so when you look at it from that perspective, the question of whether it was fraud just becomes completely arbitrary. At that point, you're just kind of arguing.
It's kind of like ties into the whole like the argument isn't about finding what's the best or discovering the truth. It's about like proving their point. I think you have a lot of that happen.
Semantics instead of looking at the root of the philosophy at the core of the argument or the point that's being discussed. Which kind of brings us to the next aspect about midwits we can use to detect them pretty quickly, which is that midwits often rely on arguments centered on deconstructing language. They think that if they take a term and deconstruct that term, then that also debunks the core philosophy behind the reasoning for why that term was created. Because oftentimes midwits do not actually understand the philosophy, they only understand the negative connotations. So for example, going back to what I said about woke ideology, one thing you can just immediately see as an obvious instant indicator of a midwit is that they will unironically make the racism equals prejudice plus power argument. If you see someone say racism equals P plus P and unironically mean it, then you instantly know that you are dealing with someone who might as well get IQ less than or equal to 115. Just nice and tattooed on their forehead. Nothing says capped at +1 SD as thinking that you can worm your way out of an ideological contradiction by simply shifting definitions around and then getting enough of your fellow midwits within your cathedral to agree with it. And this is a particularly interesting one because it's one
this is kind of why like you want to they try to control language, right? They try to control language as much as possible. They try to like shut down any sort of discourse because a lot of their arguments fall apart. Like once you like actually apply like any sort of logic to it, it just falls apart because none of it is consistent.
Average Joes, people who are even less intelligent than midwits, tend to know is a little bit wrong. So it's kind of one of the most iconic midwit memes out there. Everybody understands it's wrong except for midwits. It's an absolute classic. Now, the difference though is that oftentimes the pleb simply realizes from a point of intuition that they are being gaslit, but doesn't really understand how. And the answer is because a lot of times their main problem is that they're smart.
Is that me? I don't understand how.
Enough to understand
but I know I'm getting gaslit.
Philosophy, but they're kind of capped at conventional morality instead of universal principles.
That's me all the way on the left,
they
guy.
Don't really understand how philosophy is constructed in the first place. And the entire point of the racism lay bad idea really just came out of how the world viewed things post-World War II, and saw the horrors caused by ethno-collective guilt. And so that very quickly became the dominant thought because of the atrocities it was associated with. However, eventually people started making a pretty
this is kind of like the same thing. You see this a lot where it's kind of like oh man, guys, do you guys remember where like I was talking about this and people got really fucking mad at me? Where I said, just because a person is a Nazi doesn't mean that what they're saying is wrong. And like, dude, that drives people fucking insane. But to me, it's like it makes a lot of sense, right? Like if a Nazi said that like the sky was blue, then like yeah, right? Like it doesn't matter if he like him being a Nazi or not doesn't like change the fact that like what he said about the sky being blue is true. But then a lot of the times, like these people, they'll try to like make it that anything they say is bad. Like they could say they could say a thing that's factually true, and then they just can't agree with it, like even though it's factually true, because they don't want to be caught like agreeing with a Nazi, right?
Which is that DEI became a dominant part of the ideology as an attempt to fix lay racism. Problem is that DEI and equity are also based on ethno-collective guilt. But because postmodernist wokery has kind of always
in fact, been... the funny thing is, sorry, I know I'm pausing the video a lot. The thing is actually it serves, it's a disservice actually. It's a disservice to do this, because when you could fight their ideas like straight up by playing these games, you actually smokescreen you smokescreen their ideology by saying I'm not gonna even engage with it, like oh yeah, it's a Nazi, so I'm not gonna engage with it. Then you basically give up all of that ground when you could be arguing against like the things that you think are bad that they talk about. By literally saying I'm not even gonna fight this, you give them the entire space. Like if you think of it like a tactics game, or like, you know, a MOBA, you basically give them the entire zone of control. It's like if a Nazi goes mid, you're like, I'm not gonna even fight you, I'm gonna go bot lane, and then they just take mid tower, and they just keep pushing. Like, I'm not even gonna argue with it, right? And they just keep claiming like more and more ideological space because you refuse to actually fight it. And this is why like just kind of not in like a complete like a strategy of complete non-engagement and a strategy of like just full censorship is actually a bad thing, because it makes it so that, again, their ideology, like bad ideology can breed within that space that you allowed them to take for free.
A midwit tier philosophy. They never actually dealt with that logical contradiction as the philosophy
they're unintentionally covering for them. Yes, exactly.
Was being constructed. And so
and
now
it's the same thing with calling everyone a Nazi, right? Like if you call everybody a Nazi, then Nazi has no meaning, because if you call people who aren't Nazis, then it makes everyone else take it less seriously when they get called a Nazi. So therefore, the actual Nazis can hide within that space that you created, right? Does that make sense? You can have an actual Nazi be like, they called me a Nazi, and they'd be like, yeah, me too, bro. Right?
The eternal midwits think that they can fix that contradiction post hoc somehow by arguing semantics. Or in the case of racism equals P plus P, trying to create an exception to the rule that allows you to say that ethno-collective guilt is a good thing, so long as it creates equality. But this doesn't actually work, because you're still dealing with the contradictions of collective guilt. And so don't really realize that all they're really doing is just punishing another innocent person, instead of actually understanding how to fix the problem, which would be to reject collective guilt on principle. And it's kind of sad, really, because
I think the reason behind it, though, is so I've come to the conclusion, this is my theory. I think I'm right. I actually do think I'm right. I think this has nothing to do with equality. This has nothing to do with equality and trying to solve like past inequality and stuff. It has nothing to do with that. It's all a power play. It's all a power play, guys, like disguised as like kindness, basically. But it's 100% a power play that they're basically trying to gain power for themselves that they don't deserve by stepping on people that were actually oppressed. That's all it is. That's what I think it is.
Such a simple solution. It's right in front of their faces, but because they've built this kind of midwit tier philosophy on the foundation of a major logical contradiction, they can't accept that it's flawed, because that would force them to admit that everything they believe is basically BS. And so the rationalization hamster wheel spins forevermore. And again, remember, racism equals prejudice plus power is just one really simple, easy example. This is just a core problem with how midwits think. Rather than trying to solve philosophical contradictions and the problems that they cause, a midwit will instead try to deconstruct a simplified version of that problem, and they will largely focus on twisting the lexicon of that philosophy. Because again, they don't actually understand how philosophy is constructed, and so all they can really do is produce word cell tier arguments. And again,
this is kind of like when people don't understand hypotheticals, where like you have to solve a lot of philosophy in a hypothetical, and it's like if you can't understand hypotheticals, then like it's really difficult to actually discuss any sort of philosophy.
And part of it is them convincing themselves that if they can convince others to jump on the hamster wheel with them, then it becomes true eventually. Which kind of brings me to the next point, which is that midwits will often unironically argue that appeal to authority is a valid argument. And this is one that has some pedantic...
Hypotheticals are like a way to understand like it kind of peels back a lot of the dirt, and like it makes it easier to understand like what you actually believe in, like what's the important things of what you believe in.
Correctness to it. It is true that a random expert is going to know more about a subject than a random pleb. So if you don't know something and you know that you don't know something,
Yo, Luminous Skull, thank you for the Prime, man. Thank you. Watching this made me sadly realize my father is a Midwit and it sucks. Oh man.
then you are usually better off with guessing that an expert opinion is correct. And I suspect what's happening here is that midwits do this because they get annoyed with plebs. Plebs often suffer from the Dunning-Kruger effect, so they don't know that they don't know something. And so you ended up with the pleb who's just completely uneducated and lacking in basic knowledge of a subject, thinking that they know more than someone who's been an expert in the field for 10 years or something. And so the midwit, used to dealing with this BS, ends up just adopting the argument to trust the experts. But the problem with that is that it's not really logically consistent. True things are never true.
They fuck it up a lot too.
Because an expert says they are.
Yep.
They're true because the evidence and the rationale behind it indicates that it's true. And so there's no such thing as a legitimate appeal to authority. I mean, if you're a betting man, sure, go ahead and trust the experts and you will usually be right, but this doesn't mean you won't occasionally roll snake eyes.
Yep.
Because the reality is, human knowledge is always evolving, and experts are always finding themselves to be wrong on things. Especially when the subject is closer to being a philosophy and closer to something that you need to understand via qualitative factors than more empirical studies such as engineering. And midwits often find themselves getting confused by that distinction. And so you end up with trust the experts as some kind of midwit mating call, or thinking that they can refute an argument by demanding a source or a citation or evidence for it, which sometimes makes sense to ask for when it's an empirical claim, but the problem is that midwits will ask this question and demand a source for logical and rational claims. And then they'll think that because a source
this is why what I said earlier is like I hate discussing like philosophy, like I only like talking about philosophy only, how do I explain it? It's so annoying to discuss philosophy of something that is like actually occurring in, I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this exactly. Sorry, my mind is like a fucking junkyard, and it's like I have to like organize it before I talk. I like discussing philosophy as philosophy and like not in the context of like a specific thing that's happening, because then it becomes an issue of like, are the facts right that you bring up? Like, is like this news source like correct or something like that? And I hate discussing that because then it becomes this game of like, source, it's like, okay, well here, and it's like, oh yeah, well I have this source and this source says you're wrong, and it's like, yeah, well my source says you're wrong, and it just turns into this like, which news source is like more correct basically. And I fucking hate that. I hate that like so much. Like it's even more impossible like without actually like using hypotheticals, right? Where you have to be like, okay, well, let's assume that's true. And then we'll use your own like source as like, if you believe that source to be true, then we will use that hypothetically assuming that it's true. Sorry, I don't know if that makes sense, but
not been provided to them, then that means it must not be true. And so that's something that midwits tend to really struggle with. They know that asking for a source or asking for evidence can be a good argument.
It just turns into like a news source. It turns into a news source measuring contest, and like I hate that. Like it's the most boring fucking argument to me. Like all the time. Like, oh, okay, well, let me go look at like the exact like thing in the law like that was like from, I don't know, 1920 or something. And then it turns it, man, it's like such a fucking headache.
That's appropriate.
You know?
And as a result, they ask for it all the time. And so that makes it another very good way to kind of detect the midwit. If someone's constantly demanding a source or demanding evidence or demanding citations, and that's just how they argue, then there's
it depends, right? It depends. I think it's really situation dependent, like this thing, I think.
Pretty solid chance you're dealing with this feud, because due to the fact that it's sometimes a good argument, they will try to use it as their go-to get out of jail free whenever they don't understand something, and then they'll just hope that nobody knows.
This is why I fucking hate it. It's like I hate it so much.
This is another thing that's kind of related.
These kind of arguments are the fucking worst.
A good argument is that midwits are almost always believers in educationalism and or credentialism. And the best way to understand educationism is it's kind of like a prejudice against people who have less education than you. So they kind of look at those who don't have a college degree as being subhuman to some degree. And then credentialism is kind of...
I'm subhuman.
A combination of this.
I'm a slime, so yeah.
appeal to
Fair
authority.
enough.
It's where you start thinking that people need to be credentialed in a field in order to have an opinion about that field. So it kind of takes that appeal to authority mentality and combines it with snobbery. There's a ridiculously lengthy video on this by Adam Paladin. It's actually kind of fascinating, and it's actually far worse than just basic class elitism. And of course, it's mostly based on a person's academic credentials. Now, of course, the problem here, and the reason why education is a pretty good sign that you're dealing with a midwit, is that people who actually are unusually intelligent, people who actually do have gifted IQ, when you reach a certain level, everyone's an autodidact. Past a certain IQ threshold, a person's credentials actually doesn't really tell you a whole lot about everything that that person may know. It is extremely common for exceptionally high IQ individuals to dabble in multiple fields that go completely outside of whatever they studied in college. In fact, one way you know you're not talking to a midwit and you're talking to someone who is legitimately high IQ is that there's an almost universal hatred for the modern education system. Education in modern
Fuck them.
society is mostly geared towards rewarding obedience and conscientiousness, far more so than
I fucking
actual
hate
cognitive
them.
ability. This is why school mostly tries to force everybody to go at the same speed, instead choosing more to reward formalism and procedure. And that's actually not how highly intelligent people think. Extremely high IQ is actually associated with low conscientiousness. And so people who actually are above +2 standard deviations just kind of give the Parisian model of education we follow the giant middle finger. And while it's true that getting good grades and getting an education and getting that degree, it's all associated with higher IQ. There's pretty noticeable correlation there with an actual causal link. That doesn't necessarily mean that that achievement means intelligent. The truth is, just about any average Joe can get good grades. You just have to be willing to bark when the teacher tells you to bark. It's just easier at higher IQ because you're kind of guaranteed an A on every test. And so when you run into someone who sincerely believes that academic achievement is the ultimate yardstick.
Dude, there was like one time, this is a true story. I failed Japanese class. Like I took a Japanese 1 course in community college, and I failed because I didn't do any homework. I got 110 on every test because like there's like an extra credit question. There's always like extra credit, you get bonus points. I got 110 on every test. I aced every single test, refused to do any homework, and I failed.
By
It's very
which someone
sad.
may be judged.
I wanted to see if I could do it. I was kind of like, what if I just don't do any homework? I don't do any projects, but I ace every single fucking test. And then I failed. It was really sad.
A pretty good midwit indicator, because any truly gifted
I'm gonna be real, guys. Like, if I was doing homework, who was gonna gank the noobs at Terran Mills? I was doing a fucking public service, okay? While everybody was doing their homework, I was doing a public service. Cold blood ambushing people.
individual is gonna notice the major flaws with the education system. You're gonna know that there's a lot more to it than that. Cognitive ability is a lot more complicated.
Cold blood ambushing people like 20 levels lower than me. Like a good person.
Than that. And on the flip side, somewhat related to this, is that midwits tend to be conscientious. They're more likely to want to do what society wants them to do in terms of being moral and good. And a lot of times midwits don't realize that actual high IQ people don't think that way. Actual gifted individuals more or less care only about what is true and
Oh, are you mining that node? You mining right now? Cold blood ambush. Sometimes I would wait for people to like almost kill a mob. Like they'd get the mob to like 20%, and then I would cold blood ambush them. And then I would finish off the mob myself.
correct, rather than trying to fit in with society's expectations.
I was an undead rogue. Back when Will of Forsaken was fucking broken.
Midwits, on the other hand, are much more likely to kind of engage in mental gymnastics to try and convince themselves that what is morally considered to be the right thing to do by the bulk majority of society is also true somehow. Because a highly conscientious individual kind of...
And then I would fucking eat them, dude. I'd kill them and then I'd eat them. Eat their fucking body on the ground. No.
struggles with that line. It's kind of like how I mentioned earlier. The midwit struggles with the moralistic fallacy. They will always engage in this kind of motivated reasoning to try and convince themselves that what they view as moral based on what society has impugned upon them as moral must always be true. Which again further explains why so many midwits are also wokedoids. Modern liberal society says that equality is good, and so the midwit takes that and tries to find reasons for why equality must be good, therefore equality must be real. Which is not actually a very logically coherent way of thinking. People who actually are gifted and are unusually intelligent, they don't think this this way at all. Past a certain threshold, the moralistic fallacy just doesn't exist. Whereas the midwit, on the other hand, tends to fall more in line with the teacher's pet archetype. You know, that kid in high school who never got into trouble and was always getting praised by the teachers and was always doing every work that was asked of them.
That was not me.
And is just
I was always getting in trouble.
Little goody two-shoes. And so what happens is that kid gets tons and tons of praise and they start assuming that they're a genius. They don't realize that the way they behave is not actually how highly intelligent people behave or think at all. And that's kind of how the midwit ends up developing this inflated ego.
I was getting in trouble for playing Four Swords. playing Four Swords with my friends in the back of class. The fucking link cable, like the 4x link cable. Yeah. And then you put your backpack, you did the strategy, you put your backpack on the desk. So you like put the backpack up on the desk in front of you, right? And then you have your hands like inside of the backpack. So you have like the top of your backpack open and then you have your hands inside of the backpack. And then that way you can play in class and then like they can't see.
Terms of intellect that they don't actually possess. They think that
and Guilty Gear too. I play Guilty Gear.
Getting approval from their superiors counts as some kind of scholarly intellectual accomplishment. But if you think about it, you realize it's really not. Approval isn't really the same thing as accomplishment, for the same
really
reason
showing
that
your age
credentialism
there?
and educationalism isn't exactly true.
What? Four Swords isn't that old.
When in reality, accomplishment is more or less what you do with your education.
Man.
When you take what you know and you use it to go create something, that's more of an accomplishment. Whereas getting a round of applause and getting blue ribbons and getting a good degree handed to you and all that, it's all really just pomp and circumstance. It's more or less a celebration, more or less a ritual. But you haven't...
I played muds in school. That was like my thing. Like on like lunch break, free period, I would play muds.
Actually really created anything yet. It's just you've convinced people that you're going to create something. You've convinced people that you're capable of doing it. And midwits often have
drug simulator on your calculator, dude. There was a space trader game like where you have like a little spaceship, and then you like trade like goods and stuff. But like if you sold like narcotics, it would be you would make huge profits, but then they would scan your ship.
Trouble with that distinction. They think that being that good little obedient for
I had that game on my Palm Pilot. Don't ask what a Palm Pilot is.
4.0 student is the accomplishment in itself. But it's really not. It's completely irrelevant.
That's all I wanted for like my birthday. It was like my birthday and Christmas. And I asked my dad, like I wanted a Palm Pilot. That was like the one thing I wanted. Because that way I could type my notes instead of write them. Because like I don't like writing like on paper. But I was really good at typing. Like I typed really fucking fast. So I didn't want to take notes in class, like using like a notebook. So like for my birthday and Christmas, like both, I asked my dad if he could get me a Palm Pilot. So then I could type on it basically. So I could have like the little keyboard and I could like type in class. Yeah.
In the grand scheme of things, the pomp and circumstance.
Dude, I was really good with a BlackBerry. I typed really fast with a BlackBerry.
Circumstance is just a celebration. It's really just supposed to be a pat on the back as you go to make actual real accomplishments. But because midwits are so much higher in conscientiousness and so much more knee-deep in that teacher's pet mentality that this kind of confuses them. And from this you can kind of start to understand the whole mentality of the midwit. We start to realize why they are educationalists, why they rely so much on
There were like two things I wanted. Like when I was a kid, I asked for a Palm Pilot and a zip drive. Dad, can I have a zip drive? I want a zip drive so I can put all my Pokemon pictures on it.
Appeals to authority, why they're such rabid credentialists, and why they always adopt the dominant ideology of whatever crap they're
all these fucking Pokemon like stickers, like little pixel stickers, and I wanted to save them.
Proceduralist preaching. Because the midwit, again, often being above average in intellect, they're just trying to follow what society tells them to follow. They're just trying to fit into the mold that they think society has created for them as a so-called intellectual. But anyway, enough about how midwits try really hard to fit within academia. I'd like to wrap this up by going over a few more easier to spot, more fun examples of just the eternal midwit think, just kind of as a reward for those of you who've watched the video up to this point. So another fun one is that midwits are often rabid anti-theists, especially the Reddit midwits. And the reason this happens is because midwits tend to kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater when it comes to theology. While midwits are pedantically correct that dogma is generally stupid, and this does create a slightly different midwit meme because it's not so much that high IQ people and plebs are both religious. That's actually not really how it works. This midwit meme is more like plebs and average Joes are religious, whereas midwits tend to be more rabid anti-theists. And then at high IQ, it's not so much that you become religious again, it's just that you start questioning materialism. So they start delving into more esoteric spiritual knowledge.
Yeah.
So it's more like a curiosity of the unseen realm, more so than being religious. So you see trends towards agnosticism and deism and other paths, but those paths aren't necessarily more religious. But another big one is just kind of understanding that a lot of religious values are based on low time preference values. In many ways, the surviving religions survived because of natural selection. If a society had a religion that preached values that were more towards creating a sustainable society, then of course the logical conclusions of that are just that that religion would be more likely to be passed down to the next generation, and so on and so forth. And what midwits do is they kind of miss that point. They just see the dogma and then incorrectly associate that with all of spirituality. And so they naturally incorrectly conclude that, oh, if everybody just stopped following religion, then world peace would be achieved. And the reality is, no, that's not actually true. A lot of people actually very much need religion. And it's actually kind of extra funny because wokeism is really just a secular religion. And so a lot of woke toys are looking down at religious dogma and they've just adopted a secular.
That's why you hear a lot of people saying that like wokeism is a religion, because a lot of it is like basically it's not just like the zealousness of it, it's also that a lot of the beliefs are just things that they're like just cuz, bro. Like it doesn't actually like, again, like there's no logic behind it, right?
Form of dogma in its place. And so when you see that kind of crap, then you almost certainly know you're dealing with a midwit. Being a member of the Atheism Plus movement is almost as big of a might as well get IQ 115 less than or equal to tattooed on your forehead as believing that racism equals P plus P.
I feel like never been an atheist.
It's not quite as big of a dead giveaway there, but it's pretty darn close. Another interesting phenomenon is that midwits kind of tend to overvalue rhetoric. This is why so many midwits are kind of streamer react bros in terms of content creation. They think that if they can give a somewhat good sounding take reacting to something on the spot, then that means they've formulated a good argument. And this is another thing that's pedantically correct. It's true that a good argument doesn't necessarily have to be a true argument, because the point of an argument is to convince people, and if you come up with an argument that is wrong but is very good at convincing people, then technically it's kind of a good argument. The problem is it has nothing to do with truth. A truly good, the best argument are the arguments that lead people to believing things that are true. Whereas midwits actually seem to confuse this and think that it's literally a more correct argument. They seem to sincerely believe that on-the-spot react slopping increases the authenticity of what they're saying. And I think this one actually just kind of goes back to them confusing approval and accomplishment. They drastically overvalue the cheering crowd, and so they confuse that reaction as if it's some kind of indicator of truth. When in reality, again, they're just trying to compensate really hard for the intellect they lack with optics and a disingenuous, subversive argumentation style. When the truth is that that kind of content is actually much easier to create. It's much, much easier to create hours upon hours of slop than it does to, say, create one 20-minute video that's actually well thought out content. Which then kind of brings me to another indicator of midwittery it's not always the case, but sometimes this happens, is that midwits often try to make their arguments refutation proof by making them exceedingly long. And this can range from 10-paragraph essays on Reddit to 3-hour-long videos that are riddled with errors. And then the midwit will act as if because their entire argument has not been meticulously responsive.
By the way, that's why I take really long when I watch videos. I know a lot of people don't like that, or like I hear a lot that like, oh, you spend like too much time like watching a video, but like it's like I want to actually like engage with it. I don't want to just fucking watch a video and just be like, oh yeah, ooh, true. Yeah, me too. Like, I just don't like that. Like, I actually want to like think about what they're saying and like actually like discuss it.
To, then the refutation doesn't.
That's why I take like two hours. I mean, I take
point.
2 times as long to watch a video.
Dozens of midwit takes that are just excessively long, where the entire thing.
So otherwise, I'll feel bad. You know, like I don't know, like I'll feel bad if I do that. Like, to be honest, I don't know if that's just me being retarded, which is like, you know, it's a possibility. But I just feel bad about it. Like if I do that.
Kind of collapses when you point out one single very big error. And that's the kind of thinking that really epitomizes the midwit mentality in a nutshell. At the end of the day,
it feels like stealing content. You know, if you do that and you don't actually like add anything to it, just feels like you're just
They're just putting on a show. They're trying really hard to fit that bill of being an intellectual, and so they do everything that they can to dance to that tune. And so the essence of the midwit is really just the essence of the eternal prestige seeker. They're always looking for their next pat on the head and pat on the back, because again, to them, this approval is accomplishment. This is why the midwit often finds themselves as the man who agrees with the establishment while agreeing with everything the establishment says, because at the end of the day, the midwit still seeks approval from that very same establishment that they have deluded themselves to be fighting against. And again, almost always based on a very shallow, woke social justice ideology. But the problem is they still rely on that system to tell them what is...
I mean, to be fair, especially as a girl, I feel this a lot, where it's like, of course, it feels very good to have like to have everybody like agree with you and to like pat you on the back, right? Like it feels really good. I think. And like it feels really isolating when you say stuff that isn't like kind of the approved thing. It's like you kind of become a what's the word for it? Like you get like isolated basically, right? From you get isolated out from like a lot of communities. Like for instance, like you guys know about the stuff with like Offkai, like how they don't like Kirsha at all, and like they didn't even want her, like she was supposed to do something at Offkai, and then they freaking said like no because you make everyone feel unsafe, and like that feels bad, you know, like it feels bad to be like you make everyone feel unsafe, you're not wanted here, and like that probably does apply to like everybody, but it's particularly hard if you're a girl, I think. Because it's like, I don't know why I say that, honestly. It's just like an intuition, I guess. Like, I have no proof behind that. I'm sure it hurt. I'm sure it affects guys too. But I feel, it's just like my natural, just my thought is that it hurts girls more. Just because, yeah. I don't know.
Isn't true, and so they can never truly rise up against the establishment because
it's like, dude, I'm like I'm gonna be real, like I never talked about this, but like I was actually like at Offkai for like the first year, and I really liked all the people that were there, like all the people that worked there and stuff. I have like friends that work there and stuff, but then like hearing all this stuff about like, oh, like, you know, like, yeah, Kirsha makes people feel unsafe, and then I think about like, well, what about me then? Do I make people feel unsafe too? And it's like, again, like I have friends that work there, and a lot of the staff I really liked. And it's like now, dude, it's like every time I meet someone, and this is like this is the truth. Anytime I meet someone in like the VTuber community, the first thing that comes to my mind, how long before this person hates me? How long is it gonna take? Like, are they gonna hate me tomorrow? Like once they like look at my YouTube, are they gonna hate me immediately? Like, and it's like someone will talk to me and be like, oh, like, you know, you want to do this thing? I'm like, you know, it's like I almost feel like obligated to tell them, like, you see my YouTube, right? Right. And it's like, dude, I'm like scared. You know, like, like not in a bad way. Like, okay, so like, I'm not scared. Like, I'm not apologetic. Like at all. Don't misunderstand that. Like, I'm not gonna fucking fake it to like be friends with people, right? But it still feels bad to be like, are they gonna like me tomorrow, right? Because of my point of view on things. It's mentally exhausting, to be honest.
Their self-image as a quote-unquote intellectual is completely subordinate to it. The closest I've seen to them...
And like, to be fair, like, I don't really want to complain, like, that much about it. Like, to be honest, like, I'm pretty lucky. I'm pretty lucky because I have, like, you guys, right? Like, I have you guys, and, like, you know, you guys support me. You guys support me on Patreon. You guys support me on YouTube. Like, you guys watch the videos, and you guys support me here on Twitch, too. And I'm lucky for that, right? But yeah, so I just want to be clear. Like, I'm not really, like... Yeah, I'm lucky is what I'm trying to say, basically.
Get to
I understand. I'm very aware of that.
Stance against Zionism, but that's more of a young versus old thing. So that's something that the establishment will soon be changing its opinion on, anyways, which is going to be ushered in with a whole new set of ideological contradictions for the Midwits to believe in.
This is my favorite one, dude. When they have like the gays, trans, like LGBT for Palestine. Oh my god, this is fucking. This shit is like, this is like the most ridiculous one. This one cracks me up like all the time. Like,
contradictions that will not matter to them so long as they are
I
following.
like when you use that statement that you can't ever really explain it. Feel unsafe, like what you do mean I'm not bringing weapons. I have never been violent towards anyone. I do not have a criminal background, but you mean I say things that make you uncomfortable and that you don't agree with it?
The prescribed narrative. And it's that essence that even if you yourself are just an average Joe, that you can use.
Yeah, they say like they make you feel unsafe, and it's like, really?
To recognize a midwit. The midwit will fancy themselves as an intellectual.
I'm like always, dude, I'm like, every time, dude, every single fucking time I meet someone nowadays, it's just like, especially because it's just like, man, it's just like the VTuber community, like really, it's like VTubing and like content creation, it's like completely different, you know? It's a completely different beast. Like my friends that I meet from gaming, I'm not worried about them at all. Like the friends that I've met in gaming, friends I play tabletop with, I don't have any of these fears. But when it comes to like content creators specifically, this is why, by the way, this is like part of why I don't collab. If you're like wondering like why Leaflit never collabs, this is like part of it, because I'm just like, it's because this happened to me before. I talked about it before. Like like people reach out to me and they're like, hey, like, you know, can you help me with this thing? And I'm like, yeah, sure. And then like I'll help them with something. And then like I find out like later that they've been just like shit talking me behind my back, and like they're like blacklisting me because of my views and stuff. I was like, yo, I just like helped you. Like, I mean, of course I didn't say that. I didn't even like reach out to them or anything. But it's just kind of like weird, you know. Like I'm always afraid of like I don't trust people, you know.
But all of their arguments are actually very simple surface level things. Trust the experts. Credentials.
Like, dude, ever since the fucking the fucking Hogwarts shit happened, dude, I'm like fucking paranoid now, dude. Like, I'm so paranoid now after Hogwarts. You know, all I wanted to do was play fucking Harry Potter because I liked Harry Potter when I was a kid. I wanted to be Cho Chang. No, actually, I related more to Luna. I like Luna. She's actually the one I like.
PA. I was a good boy or girl in school. The corporate state establishment is corrupt, and the solution is more corporate state establishment. No, that source doesn't count. I need a reliable source. Correlation does not imply causation. Equality. Everyone has their own truth. Oh, what? That doesn't make sense? Let me shift some definitions around. Now it makes sense. Etc., etc. And so the midwit is always trying as hard as they can to fit this establishment mold of what supposedly an intellectual is supposed to look like. And so that's all I have to say. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. And if you like my content and want to support me, you can do so on Ko-Fi, Subscribe Star, or by buying some merch. Which again, there's a new Gamer Rant mouse pad out. But yeah, that is all. Till next time.
Oh, it's a good video. Dude, I love Mentis videos a lot. I really do. I'm gonna link you guys this video. Like, I really like Mentis videos. Please check that out, guys. Give a like.